Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. Okay, so would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
My name is CW Mundy. My wife, Rebecca, and I live here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we're in my studio right now. We recreated our garage and turned it into a studio so I could paint at home and not have to drive 25 minutes there and 25 minutes home in rush hour. I did that for 20 years.
Wow. Well, it looks like a lovely space, and you have some very impressive lights behind you. So how long ago have you converted your garage into a studio?
It's been what?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. Fantastic. So much more convenient for you, no traveling. And
Oh yeah, I can get up in the middle of the night and not bother her, and I can come into the studio and make those changes that the good Lord kind of brings to my mind. And that was the terrible thing about the other studio for 20 years is I couldn't I'd have the ideas and I'd want to do it, but you know, it was just too far away, and I'm not going to drive there, early in the morning.
And does that happen at night? Do you get these inclinations to go and make a touch or so to a painting? Does that
Well,
occur?
it can happen. It just depends, it comes to mind and you say, you know, that passage there is obnoxious, or there's something lacking, and I'm always thinking about the paintings sometimes before that I paint and always afterwards. Is that what I wanted to say? And is that what needs to be said?
Is this an intangible thing, or is this something that I can ask you about? Do you feel like there's some way of identifying a general rule for something which you find obnoxious in paintings and something which you find more elegant or successful in painting? Is that a reasonable thing to describe?
Well, I've taught for many, many years, and the good Lord gave me this concept of the 7 foundational truths in the authorship of painting, and I run everything I do through that garden, and those are the questions I can ask myself. Did I accomplish what I think I should have? And it's just basically that, they're always usually done, but I have a philosophy now later in life, after I've learned a lot more, that the painting is never really done, because there's always something. Painting is like playing professional chess. There's always a move that you can make if you can identify it, that will make the painting better. There's always something there. And so sometimes when those things hit you, and I keep getting tapped on the shoulder. I'm a Christian, and I listen to the Lord, and He's the one that. There's a scripture that I love. Psalms 32:80 says, "I will teach you and instruct you in the way you shall go, and I will guide you with my eye." And so He's the one spiritually and intellectually is the one that lets me know what needs to be done, and that and I have to learn that obedient thing to let Him run the show and get the heck out of the way. So, and sometimes that's a problem because I'm having so much fun doing the painting, and He says it's done, and then I disobey, and then I keep working on it, and then I end up making a mess out of it, and then having to backtrack where it was before. So that's the way it goes.
Well, it would be remiss of me not to ask about the 7 principles that you mentioned. Could you take us through what they are?
Well, the first one is squinting, and squinting is very, very important because it cuts out the knick-knack, paddywhack, all the unnecessary busyness that artists allow to be in their painting. They always have this attitude, well, if I'll put more in, or if I'll make this a little bit better, or do this and that, they end up overdoing it. Painting should fall under the concept of simplicity. Keep it simple, stupid is a great rule for everything in life, and especially in painting. So squinting cuts out the superfluous information that is not necessary for you to have a really strong, wonderfully designed painting. Then comes drawing in the disciplines. That's number 2. But drawing is really very similar to painting in the fact that it's all about, drawing is about relationships, as painting is all about relationships. So it's like, if you look at my eye, where do the ears line up with the eye? There's a relationship, and you can see in this thing, you can see that it's almost straight across. The cracks of the mouth, where do they line up with the eyes? And where does the bottom of the nose hit in relationship to the ears? So drawing is really simple. But people make it so much harder because they're thinking about the end product and trying to arrive at that instead of building it properly. And it's the same problem with painting. Artists are trying to build the painting improperly without laying the foundational design and getting the 2 or 3 value shapes that you need to be the foundation of everything that you're going to put on it. So but I don't spend a lot of time on drawing, because drawing, you can only paint as well as you can draw. In fact, now the last 3 or 4 years, I don't put any pencil marks. I don't put any paint marks on my paintings or anything. I just paint them. But I know how, because it's not my first rodeo. And I've got, mileage is everything, and I've got a lot of mileage. Thank the good Lord for that. So you can train your brain to think that way. Sherry McGraw has one of the best draftsmen that we have today, along with Liberace. But she professes, and it's so true. I took her class in drawing because I knew she knew things that I didn't know, and so you always go to the source. And she taught me that you don't have to measure things. You can train your brain to see those relationships, and that's what you do, and then you're able to draw. And it's the same thing with painting. You need to be able to see relationships of values, relationships of shapes, the negative spaces versus the positive spaces, and it helps you put it all together. So that's drawing. But the preeminent, the most important foundational truth in my experience is design. Design rules, because you can, if you don't have a great design, your painting is going to circle the drain. It's just not going to happen. And design is really a simple thing. There's two concepts in design, in traditional academic painting and in the modernist. In the traditional, the design is have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. The primary will end up being the centrality of focus. This is what the painting, this is the focus of that painting, and this is what's exploited. And so you learn, I teach my students how to build that centrality of focus, whether your lightest light, your darkest dark, or the strongest color, or the heaviest painting, of paint manipulation. The Greeks came up with it in architecture, the golden section, the golden rule. And it was always, if you put a tit-tat-toe board and you have the intersecting lines where those lines intersect, and up on the upper right, and I call it station number 2, it was the one that they came up with. But if it works there, it would work in station number 1. It would work down in the lower left in station number 3, or the lower right in station number 4. And those are just starting points to have that centrality of focus. But design is preeminent. It's the most important thing. You can do great with all the other foundational truths, but if you don't have a great design, like I said, it's not going to be up for the Oscars. So the second most important thing, right on the coattails of design, in my opinion, is value. Value will always be the artist's greatest challenge the rest of their lives. It's one thing that you have to take seriously, and I teach the students to have not to buy the black and white value scale at the art stores that have the 10 value range, because you don't see the halftone. The middle on a 10 value scale is between 5 and 6, and you don't see that value. So I figured it out, and I found out later after reading again Richard Smith's book, he had already found that out, and it's really the most accurate way to think in terms of value is a 9 value scale. 5 is your halftone. You've got 4 values on the light side and 4 values then on the other side, on the dark side. And you can train yourself to be able to identify the halftone. I have my students make those, paint those little squares and put it together very smallly. And then they can, when their husband's driving down the freeway or the highway, they can take that scale and have it in their hands, and they can look out at the landscape as they're driving by, and they can say, well, what's the value of that drop shadow from that tree? And then they can guesstimate, and then they can take the value and then hold it up there and check it out. And with all other things, it's a real important foundational truth that artists need to do, is you need to really get a hold and understand how to, in the beginning, you'll have to learn how to copy everything. Copy the form. It's a dog, not a cat. It's a human, not a, whatever. So, and it's the same thing with value. You have to train yourself to be able to copy that value. And in my estimation, in all the teaching that I've done, it's always the artist's biggest problem in the class, as they all have problems. And I have to confess too, there's times when I don't get it right, but I realize what's wrong with the painting. It's that I don't have the value relationships correct. You can actually paint a painting and have the different values than you're actually looking at, but they have to be relational in your painting like they're relational in life. And that's another trick that a lot of people don't realize the importance of that. But so values next, then after value is color, and color is very simple too, because color is just the intensity or the lack thereof, the chroma or the monochromatic tone of what that color is. And then the other key thing in with color is when you're going to paint things, why not think about the complementaries? Your green, red, your blue, orange, and your yellow, purple. If you're doing still lives, have a purple vase and then put lemons down on the table so that you've got the yellow and the violet. And then the purple vase, you put more of a yellow ochre, which is out of yellow, on the background behind the purple vase. And then the yellow lemons, you put a purple tablecloth or some form of that. So you have to learn. That's something I learned about 8 years ago, the importance of that. And so why would you paint, why would you not play that? The reason those the yellow, purple, the blue, orange, and the red, green, why wouldn't you not play those up when they're called complementaries? That means those colors complement each other to the hilt. And then the other thing in color that I would like to comment on is that it's really important. Kevin McPherson hired me to paint with his master program in Europe, back in 2005 and 2006. And I was aware of the fact that he just painted, he didn't use the Zorn palette, but he used just the triad color, red, blue, and yellow, the primary colors. And I was always amazed that he could get the color that he got, because I was always under the stupid influence of thinking that the more colors you have on your palette, the greater chance you're going to have to be able to duplicate what you're seeing. And actually, it's the opposite, because if you only have 3 colors to work with, then white, and or you can use black if you want to cut the chroma quicker, but your palette will be so homogenized and work so much better coming out of the 3 colors and the white that you're using, and it'll be more harmoniously. I could look through the the art books and show you examples of where the color harmony is not good, and that's because they have a spot of a rogue thing on their palette that they stuck in and placed it in there, and it has no relation. Here again, the word relationship, it has no relationships to the other colors. So that's color. Then comes edges. And I'll never forget, I took Dan Gerhardt's workshop in 1995, and I'd already had an undergraduate degree in fine art, a master's degree in painting and drawing at Long Beach State. And Dan's talking about the edges in his painting. And I thought he was talking about the four perimeters, the edge of the painting. What an idiot, So that showed you what I knew. And so edges are crucial, because the difference in edge work is the good painters do it, I would say, at a at a mediocre level, the good painters, the ones that are good, but the much better, the greater painters really understand edges and do it much more efficiently, and it really influences the painting and steps it up a huge degree by understanding edges. And then the last one is paint manipulation, and I call it that instead of brushwork, because brushwork is just too limiting. I can remember when I first started painting fine art, and it was a result of I had a 25-year illustration career, and everything I used was a brush. I didn't know how to use a palette knife at all, nor did I care. And but paint manipulation and mark making in that is hugely important because of the other term that's not in the 7 foundational truths, and that's variety and unity. If you have too much unity in any discipline, that becomes boring. If you have too much variety in any of those disciplines, that becomes chaotic. So the key in the formulas is to get as much variety, like in paint manipulation, as you can, but still have the painting unified, still have that unified. So that's the key in that, and that's a key issue, because sometimes if I'm painting outdoors, plein air, and I'm doing, let's say I'm doing the branches of the tree and stuff, instead of using a paintbrush, I'll pick up a twig and take it, because you can't, like, similar to the palette knife, you can only calculate that to a certain degree, and that's the blessing, because that's the problem with us as artists. We're control freaks, and we'll suck the blood out of everything if we get a chance. So I take that twig and dip it in the paint and scratch it up this way, and then maybe load it up again and scratch it over that way. And then you've got the palette knife. I started using Kleenex real early in my fine art career because of a painting that I did that I was so excited to do, and it was absolutely horrible. And I was so distraught, and I was about ready to just really take my knife to the canvas. And I was so angry, and I took my big 1-inch brush, and I just took it, and I went, I wasn't looking. I just did that. I didn't even want to look at the paint. It was so horrible. It was so contrived and controlled. It didn't have any of the quality that I was wanting to have. And I didn't even look at the painting, and I just went back and stood back, and then I came back to, I don't know what I was going to do, but I sat down. Oh, I was going to take it off and just tear up I was going to just, it was on stretcher bars, and I was just going to bust through the whole thing. And so I reached over and I looked up and to pick it up, and I looked at it and I went, oh my gosh, that looks great. It was because the spirit of not looking and trying to make marks and messing it all up, I only had to come back with a couple of marks and reconnect a couple of things, and the painting was excellent. And that's what really launched my fine art career. And Satan was right there at the beginning going, you can't call that art. You can't call that art. You're going to make your whole career of messing up paintings. And that's what my career has been. Learning, Whistler says, I build the form and I destroy it. I build it and I destroy it. I build it and I destroy it. The more you take your painting through that, actually, the more beautiful and explosive and interesting and maybe charismatic might be a possible word, but I find myself, because I've been painting for so long, I can come to a conclusion of a painting way too soon, and it'll be a fine painting, but I'm not getting better at my craft. I'm just staying in one spot. And then I realized, so I really, in the thought process when I'm doing it, it's so important to know I can bring it back, I can fix it, and it'll be much better for it. When I was teaching, one of the things that I would do, I'd have 20 students for a week, and I had 2 assistants working for me so we could get much more accomplished with the students. And so they would, after I did my lecture, my slideshow to back up the lecture, and then my demo to back up the slideshow and the lecture, then they were to do their first one. And they would do their first painting, and then so all 20 would be done. So I would take my brush and my palette knife and Kleenex, and I'd stand behind the painting with them standing, and I'd ask the class, does this painting need brain surgery? Meaning that it was really a pretty good painting and it just needed, some real smart chess playing. Or is it a truck driver? It means it's, it needs a little bit more than brain surgery. And then there was the bulldozer, and the bulldozer is the one that their painting is so left brain. It is a horrible reproduction of what their subject matter is, and it's so left brain and uncreative and all of that. So I would stand with my brush and look at the students would be all standing behind me, and I'd take my brush and I'd go shh, shh, like that and mess their old painting, and the lady go, "Oh, don't do it! You're ruining my painting!" I didn't say anything about it. I got news for her. Her painting was so homely. And then I would go back and then I would patch it up, and the students were like amazed. I mean, the painting, it had spirit, it had movement, and they would be shocked. And so after doing that 3 times, then the 4th or 5th time, then I'd ask the class, brain surgery, truck driver, or bulldozer. And they all got it right. They could see, based on what I was trying to teach them, how to do it. And I would do it. And then after get through all 20, then they start, before they started their next painting, they would go back, like a bunch of them would go back and patch the painting back up exactly the way it was before we did any messing up, and then run it again. So then I'd have to explain to them that, but that all comes with mileage. And a lot of times the students that I have, which I would rather have, I would rather have students that don't have any mileage at all, or very little, because there's not that deep programming that I have to take them through, because, well, they'd say, my high school teacher told me to do such and such. And I said, well, this is a level we're trying to get at professional painting, and this trumps, what they were telling you, and in my opinion. And so that's variety and unity. And then I have the alien factor, the face factor, and the association factor that I could talk about if you want to hear it.
Absolutely. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. The face factor is very simple and very explicit. The reason the face factor is an important aspect in painting, especially if you're going to have figures in a painting, in a landscape, depending on how close they are and this and that in the forefront of the painting, the face factor is crucial, because if you don't have the face obscured and it is maybe not even as visible as mine is, or as I'm looking at you, it's going to draw all the attention. It's going to be the centrality of focus. And the reason for that is we spend our whole life we're social creatures. And when I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at your shoes and talking to you. I'm looking at your face. We have relationships with humans. we look at them. We want to see how they respond to what we're talking. We just like to look at faces, and we talk to people. We look at their faces. So it trains us. That's a subconscious thing that happens in art. It's so apparent in art. So when you like Manet's famous painting of what's the bartender, or his painting, he's got this lady with a dark little black necklace, which really draws your attention because it's one of the darkest things in the painting. And there's her face, and he's got a still life over here with bottles, fruit, another still life over here, another thing over here, heads and figures in the background and everything. But because the head's large enough, and in that, and you could, you got everything, the kitchen sink thrown in there, you can get away with, if you've got the head large enough, and it will still remain your focus. So that's the face factor. The association factor is, I learned this from looking at Edward Sego's, British, one of the greatest plein air painters in my estimation, in this generation. He had this painting of the Grand Canal in Venice, and he had down in the bottom corner here, he had these two little gondolas with a gondolier and a paddle, and one of the gondoliers, I'm trying to do with my finger, one of the gondoliers was going that direction, the other one was going a little bit, and they were sort of close to each other, but they were different sizes and different shapes. Well, you knew that was the Grand Canal, and you knew those were boats. So then the one up here, which is much smaller, if you blew that up on a screen, large on the screen with nothing else, you would have no idea what that is. And then all of the little boats that were all up over in here that are really, really small, you wouldn't know what those are. But because you know what these are down here, the association factor, these are boats on that water, and so these are too. So that association factor is crucial in painting, because, well, let's take another example. If you do a bouquet of flowers in a vase, paint one flower with the believability that you want. If you want them to know it's a rose, then make it look enough so that they believe that it's a rose. Then the ones that are secondary around them, you paint them with less detail, and the ones that are in the background, it's just the same color and the same value, and it's just a stroke here and a stroke there. That's the association factor. Because, and what my problem with so many artists is, they tell way too much of the story, and then there's that unity and variety factor. They didn't paint the roses with a variety of ways to make it much more exciting and interesting, and it's boring because there's a rose, well, that's painted just like that over here, and this one over here, that's painted just like the main one. The boring factor starts coming in, and that's the difference between great painting and mediocre work. The alien factor that the Lord showed me to come up with is really crucial, because you can have an alien color in your composition, an alien shape, you can have an alien value, and it could be a shape that is not like anything else in the painting, meaning it's alien to every other form, every other color, but it could be one of those. It doesn't have to be all of those. It could be one of those different situations, and that will draw your attention. So you can have an alien factor in the centrality focus. You could have your lightest light and your darkest dark right next to each other with a hard edge, and based on how long that edge is, you're going to be there, because it's white against black. That's what op art was all based on in the 60s and 70s, using triangles and circles and shapes, black and white, and doing that and getting that flash. And they also did it with color, the strongest color of red, the same value next to the same value of the strongest color of green at the same value. And you get a flash in between. When those two meet, you get a flash. And that was the op art in the contemporary market. So the alien factor works that way. And then you can also have an alien factor in the secondary or tertiary area, but much smaller and much not as significant. And that will draw you back to that area too. And Sargent's painting of the three girls on the carpet, and he's got the big white pillared bases on both sides, and then the red screen up over here, and then the one standing next to the wall, she's got two skinny legs that are black like sticks. And so those shapes, there's no other shapes like that in there. So that helps you with her with that white dress and differentiates her from the girls that are sitting down. So that was a crucial thing that I learned, and I think it's very important. So those are concerned with what I call the authorship of painting. Those things are very important to know, because my goal as an instructor is to build a good, strong toolkit for the students so that they can have a checks and balance and be able to evaluate their paintings in not only a scientific way, but I would call it in an appropriate way, you know. So that's kind of that.
Well, it's a great privilege for us to have you on the podcast. So I do appreciate you being on to talk to us. If I may, because we've had you for so long, you've been so generous with your time, I'd like to ask you a couple of things that I would regret if I didn't. And that's one is, could you take us through the colors on your color palette, please?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's my color palette is very simple. It's red, yellow, and blue. It's yellow, yellow light, cadmium yellow light. I like Prussian blue because I can get greens that I need better than French ultramarine, although I have used French ultramarine instead of Prussian blue. And then I use cadmium medium red. And then I have a titanium white in the large tube, an alkyd. I use Michael Harding paints. Michael's a good friend of mine, he and Karen. And so I'm a sponsor for him, and I love his paint. And then sometimes I'll use a black because you can extinguish the chroma much quicker than using the complementary. The impressionists use the complementary to kill the chroma in the color that they're using, but black will do it much quicker. And in fact, I like that because black is the backbone of all the great masters. And another thing that I would say about color and my color palette is value rules over color. And it's because if you're in a dark room and you don't want to trip over your slippers, or you're walking on a street corner and it's not real bright, it's later at night and there's not that much light, if you don't see the value of the difference between the street and the sidewalk, you can break your neck. So value is crucial for existence, but color is not. But color is his mercy and grace on us to be able to enjoy color, because when we go to heaven, the color spectrum will be totally different and much, much more brilliant than it ever was.
That's wonderful.
here.
Oh, sorry, I
So
didn't mean to cut you off. Excuse me. Yeah, please continue.
yeah, so uh, that's something I think that's really interesting. That's why I'm not a fan of the Hinchey color value, that it's the same, because it's not. The masters never thought that way. And in my book, The Master's Rule, I told myself when I left illustration, and the Lord spoke to me about this, if you can come up with an authentic look, a turn of the century look, meaning 19th century, the late 1800 painters of Impressionism, if you could come up with that kind of a look, you could establish yourself, and have a career in fine art. That was always my goal. And that's why I'm so in love with the history of art, and what has been produced before me. And I hold it in high reverence, because they're some of the greatest painters that ever painted and ever will paint. It's a lost time, and today in society, it's not really that, it's nearly important to a lot of artists as it is to me. And part of the reason maybe it's just because I'm old school.
When you mentioned your color palette, when you mentioned a black, I meant to ask you which black you use, because there are different types of black. So,
Well, I'm not that brilliant on the difference between Mars black and lamp black. I think one might be cooler. I don't know how they make black pigment if it comes out of carbon. I don't know how they arrive at that, but I do know the fact that it is a neutral gray. The halftone is a neutral gray. When you add white in it, there doesn't appear to be any color or anything like that. And I learned all about this when I was in college. We would go to the museums and you'd look at this and that, and I'd stand in front of a painting that I really love looking at, and I'm going, what color is that? I could never figure out. And I wasn't thinking in terms of the value, because I was trying to figure, back then I was, maybe I had the attitude you could solve your paintings with color, and which is absolutely not true. You solve your paintings with light, and that's from white to black value. And so I could never figure this out. And I would always, sometimes I'd see paintings, it doesn't look like it's toward the reds. It doesn't look like it has a blue cast to it, based on all the other colors. There were other colors that I could identify in the painting, but I couldn't identify that color in a bunch of different paintings. And these were old, masters paintings. Well, the reason is because the artist used a lot of black in that, and it neutralized. There was no identifiable color in it.
mm,
It didn't go towards purple. It was, because I tried to say, was that more lavender? And as I remember, I'm thinking that the value of it was between a half tone and the 9 value black. So it was a darker value. So that proves the point that the darker values, these masters would use more black into it, and just get enough color that would actually work for them to make it work in the painting. But I did several discoveries, because I understood that finally. And I had a painting that was Duck Creek, that's down in southern Indiana, one of my favorite places to paint. I've painted it more than anybody alive or dead, I'm sure. And this painting was like a B minus. It just wasn't happening. And I knew it was never going anywhere, because I'm not going to put that kind of stuff. If I'm not that happy with it, it's not going to get out into the public. So I said, I'm going to try this experiment, because I thought I might know what would happen, but I didn't know how effective it really became. So I mixed up a halftone of warm, added a little yellow ochre into the halftone, and it was gray, but it was a warm gray. And then I added maybe a little bit of blue into the other halftone pile. So I had a warm halftone and a cool halftone of the gray value. And I took my palette knife and then mixed that, because everything on my painting was not, it wasn't a half tone. And so I would take my palette knife and use a healthy serving of that and mix it the value that was the painting. The value wasn't the problem. The painting was just uninteresting, didn't have enough paint on it, and didn't have enough palette knifing. And I knew that if I wanted to try it with this, so I used warm and cool grays based on the value that was already there, and mixed it to that and put it on there. The painting turned out terrific.
Mm.
And here's the catch. Here's the neat reason why it did, because your brain, there was enough color in there, although it was fairly tonal, but there was enough color in there that when you put these other different values of warmer or cooler gray with a palette knife in there, your brain read that as being a color. So actually, theoretically, actually, gray with the absence of any color can be a color, because it's a color that doesn't have color, but acts as color and works in your composition. And that was a huge discovery for me about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, that I stumbled on that. Well, I say stumbled on, but the Lord's gone, hello, is anybody there? You might want to try this. And so anyway, and I still to this day, I'll take, like I said earlier, I personally believe, and it's my opinion, that a painting is never done. And if you can play a higher game of chess, you can always upgrade the painting. But it's like playing chess. You better make the right move. And if it doesn't make the painting better, then you wipe that mark off and get rid of it and try it someplace else. Because if you leave it there and then go to something else and do something else, you make 5 or 6 different marks. You can take that painting down from being an A painting to a B minus, because they were the wrong moves. So literally, I think painting is like playing chess. I don't play chess, but I know that it's a really serious mental game, and it's based on strong visual understanding and patterns and all that, and how to play the game properly. But painting is really a lot like that. It's playing chess. So I will do that with warm or cooler grays and put those in there, and maybe make the stroke more interesting. Where I had a brush stroke, it might require a palette knife and a skip, and it would work. So it's always fun to do those things, and I've been amazed, because of the maturity that God has given me as an artist. I've been able to make C and D paintings, turn them into really much better paintings, and paintings that I would be happy having on the market, because mileage, and that's something that I didn't talk about. Mileage is a key aspect in painting. Donald Putnam, who was the greatest, he's touted as being the greatest brush and colorist to ever teach at Pasadena Arts Center, which is a big deal. He was an instructor of mine, and he told me, he said, CW, it's about 2 things. It's about value and mileage. And the more mileage you have, the better you're going to do with value. And value is going to be a struggle until you take your last breath. But at least you can get a hold of it and get control of it enough to make really successful paintings. But the real geniuses in art are the ones that are super with understanding how to make the value relationships work to the best of that composition, and they've got that enormous amount of mileage to be able to make those decisions, like I said with chess.
Mm.
That's really what it is. That's the difference there's a big difference between the masterful genius artist and the really good artist. There's a huge gap between that. There's a gap that you can put in between there. You can actually have between the great genius masters, you can have great painters. They're great, but they're not the genius quality. And certainly I'm nowhere near that either. But there's that. And then there's the good, really good artists. And there's a big gap between the good and the great artists. And all of these gaps are the difference between mileage and having an understanding of their craft. That's why the greatest painters were usually in the history of art were, you know, the guys that stayed with it their whole lifetime, did all those biblical commission paintings, you know, Rembrandt, Peter Paul Rubens. Look at Monet at the end of his life, all the stuff that he went through, and the cataracts. The cataracts were one of the greatest things that ever happened to him because he was such a great painter. He couldn't see color, but he just had to keep painting. He said, oh, I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later. And he did. When the cataracts were better and he could see color better, he'd come back in and put some color correction in there, but leave the sour color that wasn't what nobody would intentionally put that on the first place, put it on there. But he did that, and that's what made some of his lily pond paintings some of the greatest masterpieces, because he, you know, God allowed him to have the cataracts and do that. So that's just another tidbit that's really interesting in the history of art.
We try to see the diversity of experience which artists can share regarding galleries. If you have anything to share about your gallery experience, good or bad, that you can contribute so that people can understand how it can at times be navigated, if that makes sense.
Galleries always seem to be an important issue for artists as they're starting out. And I started out with trying to find galleries, and the way that I would find them, which was actually wrong, I would find galleries. I was doing a lot of, when I first started doing fine art, I was doing women and children at the beach, because Frank Benson, the American post-impressionist, that I loved his work, and he'd have these little girls with white dresses and flowers in their little bonnets, and they'd be down by the water playing, and they'd have little pond yachts and stuff. I would do those, and so I looked for, and when I'd find a gallery that had somebody that was painting that stuff, I would send them like 6 or 7 images, and then I would find some. This is way back, you know, before internet or social media, so you had to mail stuff out, and so I'd get sometimes an answer, and sometimes, you know, people wouldn't answer, but they'd say, well, I like your stuff, but we already have, if you look at our website, you can see we already have an artist that's selling that kind of genre and those types of paintings. So we don't really want to put you in competition with him or him in competition with you. You know, it might be wise for you to find somebody that doesn't have women and children at the beach. So that was a learning lesson, and I share that with people who are going to send things out either by text or emails or whatever to galleries. I wouldn't be looking at the galleries that have the kind of stuff that you want to paint. I would think, first of all, I would try to get in some of the more known, better galleries if you can, if they will give you a chance. And you should only send, even if it's already sold, only send them like 2 or 3 at the most of the best things you've possibly ever painted, and send them those, because you want to have your best foot forward. If you send anything that's if you send 3 paintings and 2 are mediocre and one's really good, guess what? They're not gonna touch you with a 10-foot pole, because then that means you're a hit and miss artist. They want the artists that they can sell, that have continual work that is of a quality that their gallery honors and respects, and you've got to meet that standard. So that's what I would do for galleries, and galleries were important to me. And then another thing that was important to me that my wife and I did, that God instructed us about, was, why does Coca-Cola put these ads on TV? Why does Pepsi? Why does Burger King? Why does McDonald's? Why do bed sheet companies do that with bedroom stuff? Why do companies advertise? Because they find the demographics and shoot for those and put it out to the public, because if the public doesn't know that you have something that's available, then it's really hard to sell. So i.e., if you're just in your studio and all you do is paint, but you'd like to sell your paintings, if you don't have an avenue for people to see those, then that's a problem. It's always going to be a problem for the artist. I just was fortunate enough to have God show me the business sense of the business, which is something that many people have applauded me with, being able to know you can have the piggy, but you got to know how to take the piggy to the market. And that's where good galleries come in. Also, too, another way to skin the cat is on social media, on Instagram or on Facebook, that you can post these paintings. And especially if you're just starting out and you haven't been painting for a long time and you can't find any galleries that want it, then price your painting maybe lower than what you think that they're worth, and try to get people to start buying them. I sell my stuff on Facebook. In fact, I've had 3 people I had to turn down on these little miniatures because they're for an exhibition. So people will buy on Facebook and they'll buy off of Instagram, and then you can start. I knew one person that would paint a small, I think 4x4 paintings every day, and he'd paint that and he'd put it on there for like 75 or $100 unframed. And this is how he launched his career, and he started selling a ton of them. And so that the social media is a really great way, but then you have galleries that that sometimes have trouble with artists that are selling on their own and through Facebook or Instagram, and then they're underselling. If they were in the gallery, their paintings, they charge more in the gallery because you have to give the gallery split. And so they don't like that going on, where somebody can come to you and buy it cheaper. That cuts their possibilities of selling that. So it ends up being a problem for the galleries, and I can understand that. I know of instances of galleries that I've known that have talked to me about. They're really upset because these people are underselling them. In fact, that's what the plein air movement has kind of really been a big, huge problem for galleries and gallery representation, because the people that go to all these plein air events will sell their paintings at least 50% off and unframed, and people will buy them because they don't have to pay the other 50%. Usually beginning artists, they have to do a 50-50. There's probably no gallery that will do any better than that, especially if you're early in your career. You can't expect better than a 50-50 deal. So the artist will sell it at 50% discount at the plein air events and sell a bunch of them, and then that puts pressure, and it's harder for them, the galleries, to try to sell their work that's twice as much as what they're selling for.
Yeah.
And so 50%, or $100, it's $200 in the gallery. And so that could be a problem. So they have to understand the rules and be smart about it. But I think you can actually do it both ways. There are galleries that will respect you and give you that ability to do that, but they will ask you, please try to keep the selling price, the retail price, close to what it's going to be in the gallery. And then we don't have an issue as long as that person didn't find you in our gallery. And if they found you on your own, then it's fair game for you. You don't have to give up the 50% that you do with me in the gallery. So there are ways to work at it. And that is an excellent question, because I know what we've done when I taught and we had all these workshops that I had done for the last 15, 20 years. We would have a Thursday afternoon. The workshop would go from Monday to Friday, 9 to 4:30. And on Thursday afternoon, whoever wanted to, my wife and I did a business seminar with the students that were there to talk to them, to answer all their questions. And what we did was we used my career, how we launched my career with magazine ads and all of this stuff. I started advertising on my own because I realized the galleries weren't going to, couldn't afford, they weren't selling enough of my work to take a full page ad out. So early in my career, back in the 90s, say 90, 95 and 96, we started advertising in American Art Review, and they were a bi-monthly magazine. So we started taking 6 ads out a year, and they were $2,500 a piece way back then. They're certainly more now, but we would do that, and we would have that in the magazine. And then if you put in, the people would start watching, and so here's a new guy on the block. I was the second artist to show in American Art Review, living artists. They had mostly articles on deceased painters, great masters, and different schools of art, and have articles. And then they didn't have many people putting ads in the magazine because they were expensive. They were $2,500 a piece for a full page. So anyway, I started doing that, and then they started finding out, well, they liked the first one, and they thought the second painting was good. And then by the third time we put that in that bi-monthly magazine, we started getting calls and interest, and people started buying out, from the magazine ads that we put in there. Or at least if that was sold, they would say, well, what else do you have? And we'd show them what we had, and we started selling that way. But I don't think that the magazine things, I know the magazine people would be probably upset with this statement, but I think still probably the galleries and the social media are really the way to go to promote your art, because to get in the publications, the magazines, it's expensive. You can do an eighth of a page, a third of a page, a half a page, maybe even a 3/4 of a page now, but it's still quite expensive for them to do that. And the other thing that I taught them about our blueprint for how we launched our career, I realized that you can't just put $2,500 in on a full page ad and then expect the world to start coming to you. You have to do a campaign of ads and advertisements, and then you're investing your money, and it works for you. It's the same thing with all the big companies. They just don't come up with an ad. They do several ads on all their products and stuff like that to reach the demographics that can be reached.
I know I could talk to you for another hour at least about your work, but I must let you go at some point. So I have to ask, where would you advise our audience, whether they're listeners or viewers, to go to see your work and to support you either online or in person? Are there places that you would think is the best place for them to go?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and my wife puts my paintings on Instagram, and so we have that. We're in Ross Fine Art Gallery in Indianapolis. He kind of takes care of our art affairs and everything on a local level. Because of our age, we have a great relationship with Jim Ross, and he's a phenomenal human being, and he really takes care of us and sells our work. And then we're with J.P. Boudreau and Folly Cove Fine Art in Rockport, Massachusetts, and we're in Gallery 1261 in Denver, and I'm
Santa Fe Trail.
and then Santa Fe Trails in Santa Fe, and I am a signature member of master signature member of Oil Painters of America. I'm a master signature member of the American Impressionist Society, and I'm a fellow at the American Society of Marine Artists. So all of those things are possible things to view my work. I am something I just wanted to say. I wanted to thank you too, that you did a really nice, we watched it, you did a really nice Zoom with Tad Retz. Tad's been a very close friend for about 3.5 years, 4 years, and he's allowed me to help groom and teach him. And he is in my estimation, he's one of the finest painters coming up, and he's so young. He's only 28, and he just gets better and better and better and better. I tell him many times, we talk every day on the phone, and we FaceTime, and I tell him, I'm going to break your stinking little fingers. It's really terrible when the student is out painting the mentor. And he does. I mean, he really he adds to my arsenal of an approach to painting. He is a spectacular young painter, and he's such a nice human being. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, and I'm so glad that you had him on your Zoom, because he's going to be one of the real solid guys that's going to carry the history of art a long way, and especially after I'm off of this earth. And I have a lot of respect and love for that kid. I tease him. I'm kind of act like I'm his second dad. I love his dad, Dan, and I don't want to take his dad's position as father, but I'm kind of like his adopted second father, because I really look after him, and he's a hard worker, and I just love him so much.
Well, it's very kind of you to thank us for that. He was a wonderful guest, just as you've been. And I appreciate both of you for your generosity and the insights that you've shared with the listeners and the viewers of the channel. It's going to be incredibly valuable, because once it's online, we have no intention of it coming down. So it's going to live on past all of us, I think. So I very much appreciate your generosity and your time. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be able to share your heart, and that's what I did.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.